Harry Barber is a key driver of Electrify Yarra and also works as a transport consultant. And we're really pleased to have Tim Johnston, who's the CEO of Powerhouse. Tim is an industry expert, particularly regarding hot water heat pumps. And I'd note that Tim's company, Powerhouse, works closely with organisations to support those householders that are struggling to be able to get hot water. So they do great work. So before we hear from Harry and Tim, who are going to give us all the info about hot water heat pumps, let's listen to Gus talk about two new arrivals. If you can press the button, please, Julian. Thanks.
So Gus, what water heater system did you have before?
We used to have a gas hot water system all the way at the back of the property that was 30 years plus old.
And what have you changed to and why?
We've changed to a electric heat pump, as you can see here, Aquatech brand, V6 I want to say, I can't remember. It's more than enough for our family of 2.5.
What were you worried about?
The only thing we were really worried about was the noise, and it's not that bad. The gentleman on the phone at Aquatech helped us put it to a slower heating setting, which was therefore a lot less loud. And you can see we've got our, what's it called? The fan for our air conditioner right next door to this unit, and they sound basically the same.
And do you noticed any differences cost-wise?
Yes. So basically, we are saving a couple of bucks a month in total on our bills, which is electricity and gas combined. But bear in mind, over that same period of time, we've been using a lot more electricity because of this one. So basically, we got off the majority of our source of gas, which was the hot water, but we're still paying for that, to use that for our cooking. But overall, we are definitely saving money and saving the environment. Hooray! And
do you have any access to free energy?
We do have access to free energy. The lovely people at Electrify Yarra put us on to can't remember the name off the top of my head, but yeah, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. we get free electricity, which is when this heats up with hot water. And we also do our washing and dishwashing.
Any other comments?
Get yourself a hot water pump. It's good.
Thank you very much, Gus. And look, Gus gets extra points because not only was he getting a new baby, he was getting a heat pump at the same time. So I think those of us who've been through that experience would be impressed at his multitasking. Okay, so Julian, let's see the menu for tonight. We're going to go through some interesting things. You won't want everything on the menu, but I hope you'll find some of it interesting. And if there's a question we're not addressing, then jump in the Q&A. Okay, we've got a more sensible list coming up next. So we'll look at why hot water matters. We'll look at the cost of gas. We'll look at what happens switching to an electric heat pump. Many people are interested in the payback and the return. How soon do you get your money back? And then, of course, you've got to choose a unit. And then we've got to choose the options and configurations on that. It's like buying anything, really. And then the last part of the video is going to be, we're going to offer you chances of one-to-one follow-up. David's going to talk through his hot water decision. He went through the process, and you'll hear how he decided and what he decided. And then finally, Russell's going to give you a quick look at the hot water hub that has been put together, and there's a lot of really useful information there. So if we haven't overloaded your brains tonight, the hot water hub will finish the job. Okay, and I'll be chatting with Tim, and we'll take a fairly informal approach to this. But I do want to start with why hot water matters. And it's important to, if you can take us on to the next one, thanks. Gas is a problem. Different people see it as a different problem in different ways, depending on your perspective. I think we've all seen recently that fossil fuels are going to have very volatile prices, and there's sort of national security, but there's also home bill security. And if you want to lock in the cost of your bills and stop them jumping up and down over the next few years, that's something to think about. Some people I talk to, they're really focused on the environment, this wonderful cathedral, this ecosystem we live in. And if you love that and care for that, that might be a reason for you to switch your hot water. And then, of course, some people, they think of the kids, they think of the grandkids. And Tim, you've got a couple of smalls. Was that part of your decision to get into the hot water business?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 2 young girls, 7 and 4, and yeah, wanted to work in the climate space to, I guess, work for a better future for them, and look them in the eye in a few years' time and say that I've tried to do a little bit. But yeah, they're all small stepping stones.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so we'll leave the big picture now and we'll go to get into brass tacks. So if we can go to the next slide. It's not true around Australia, but in Victoria, most Victorians use gas for hot water. Most people have a tank. That's the one at the hairdresser near me. And the people who don't have a tank have an instant system. And then some people have a solar heat absorber with a gas booster for winter. And looking at the tickets, those of you who came in through Humanitics, everyone in the audience has at least one of those systems or isn't sure what they have. But we're going to assume that you've got gas. Okay. So the problem with gas in Victoria is we used to have all this gas in Bass Strait, huge reserves, and people said 50 years ago, this will last for 50 years. Well, the 50th year is fast approaching. It's next year or the year after that. And then we're going to have to be piping in gas from elsewhere. And, this volatile situation I talked about, they're going to want to sell gas overseas. The price is going to be, it's going to be volatile because we're running out. So you need to feed that into your thinking. Okay, so the next thing is, if you look at the, if you go to the next slide, thanks. That's the uptake of hot water heat pumps in Victoria. People are queuing up to get them and getting out of gas. Have you found, Tim, that people are switched on about all of this, or do you have to start right at the beginning, or do people come to you and say, I'm ready to change, tell me what I should do?
I think I live in a bit of an echo chamber, Harry. So
Right.
a lot of people coming to me saying that they want to.
Yes.
Got a few family members that love gas for reasons that perplex me. But yes, for most of the people coming to us at Powerhouse are some way on their journey to looking at replacing their gas hot water with a heat pump hot water, and then there'll be a different parts of that journey. Some are at the very start. I'm very often I'll get a comment of I started with Google and I just got lost. So that happens quite a lot.
Yeah, right.
A wave of information out there, although this webinar will hopefully be a better starting point than Google. But others will be further down the track.
That is a problem, isn't it? There's one of the great things about the internet is it's full of information, and one of the worst things about the internet is it's full of information. And I guess that's some of the, those of us in the electro volunteers, like in our groups, we've been through it before. We've made mistakes. We've seen lots of people go through the change, and we can help you make those decisions. Okay, so go to the next one. So if you've got a gas meter, there's 3 things to think about. So the big one, if you've got a gas meter and you've got gas heating in winter in Victoria, that's probably the biggest part of your bill. You're paying those bills over a couple of months. So not all year, but when they come, quite heavily. That can be quite a costly switch, and it's quite complicated, and you've got to decide what sort of heat you like in your house. Cooking, I always say to people with cooking, if you've got asthma, that's the first thing you should do, get gas out of your house. But that can be expensive. The induction tops are fabulous to use, but they're not cheap to buy, and then you've got to fit them into the cooktop and all of that sort of thing. And you don't really save that much gas. You just don't breathe that much gas. So really, I'm a great believer in saying, let's talk about hot water. it's down the side of the house. It's in a cylinder. We're just talking about changing out the old gas and bringing in the electric system. And I think it's the cheapest and easiest switch. But there's many ways through the maze. Tim, do you find that hot water is the first thing people do, or is it the last thing, or is there no predictable pattern?
I don't think there's a predictable pattern. I think the other common sense thing to overlay on that is to look at how old the respective appliances are. So,
Yeah,
I'm a big advocate for, if you've got a 3-year-old gas hot water unit, but your ducted heating unit is 25 years old, and it looks like it's showing its last signs of life, then that couple of $1,000s that you might direct towards a heat pump hot water may be better directed to that, replacing the gas ducted heater. So yeah, for us, it's all different people along the journey. It might be the last gas appliance, and then if that is the case, well, then the savings are even better, because if you do get rid of gas from the property, you save about $1 a day, even more. And I've actually done some sort of numbers on that to show that if those increase at 5, 7, 9% per year, the value of that just exponentially grows, and it becomes a significant amount of money over, say, a 10-year period, which the other thing from a finance perspective is that's a guaranteed saving. If you can get rid of gas altogether, it is a guaranteed saving, no questions asked. And from a investment return point of view, that's pretty rare.
So I think maybe what we can say then is there are 3 cards that you have to play. It's a 3-card trick, and you can play them in any order. But once you've played all the 3 cards, then you get this, you knock off the meter, and that's $400 or so a year saving, which just accumulates. Very satisfactory. Okay. Go to the next one and say, okay, it isn't the must first move, but it's a good first move. And again, I come back to, if you're not a cook and you're looking forward to getting induction for a special reason, or all of those sort of things, if you're not sure which is your first move, hot water is a good one. Okay, so we'll look at why, and we'll move into the world of money and bills, because we want to see how much money is leaking out of your gas hot water system. So we go to the next one. And this is these are one of these somewhat subjective estimates, because we don't know how much hot water you use, and we don't know what sort of unit you've got. But I think it's defensible to say that someone with an instant gas heater is spending $400 a year to get the hot water, and someone with a gas tank system is spending $600. And the difference is because the tank runs all the time, and the instant only runs when the hot taps are turned on or the hot shower is turned on. So I've talked to lots of people about their bills and looked at their bills, and here's 3 examples. They're much higher than my numbers above. So in one household, 2 people, they had one of those solar absorbers with a gas booster, and it was running all the time on gas because the solar absorber stuff had broken down over the years. They were spending $755 a year. And then over on the right, these are folks made a great effort to insulate their house, but they've got gas heating in winter and they've got gas hot water, and they're spending $2,000 a year. And by a matter of the merest chance, the middle household is a guy called Tim Johnson, and he's on this call. Tim, tell us about your gas bill.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a numbers nerd, and I wanted to have a look at the impact of replacing a gas storage unit with a heat pump hot water unit on our bills. And so there's 2 ways you can do that. You can look at the bills just through summer, because you can assume that there's not much gas used, and we don't use gas for heating anyway, but you can basically assume that all that gas is used for your hot water during a summer period. And then we looked at it over the whole year period as well, which is obviously going to be a bit of variation depending on one year to another. But yeah, my family of 4, myself, my wife, 2 young kids, we went from spending $708 a year on gas. That's just the running cost. So that's not the daily supply charge. That's just the running cost for our gas hot water unit. And we replaced it with a heat pump hot water unit. And the cost of that, so our gas bills went down. Obviously, the electricity bill will go up because we're now powering the heat pump by electricity. We don't have solar, and the electricity bills went up by $120 to $130 a year. So a net saving of around $580. The cost to put that in would probably be around about $2,000. So you're looking at a payback of a little over 3 years. And the other key here, Harry, as I'm sure you appreciate, is this is based on current gas prices.
Yes.
I can't stress that enough, because if you look back at the gas prices over all the time I've been analysing my bills, they're only going one way.
That's right. Yeah. So that's another variable. The gas cost will change over time as well. But so $600, it's of that order. And if we go to my one of my investment advisors here, and Warren Buffett, as you know, is if we can go to the next one, please, Julian. Thanks. Warren Buffett's a famous investment advisor who made himself a lot of money, and his rule was never lose money, and his second rule was never forget rule 1. And I think that applies to hot water. So Tim had $600 leaking out of his house every year, and he's plugged that leak by putting in the heat pump system. Okay, let's talk a bit about switching to a heat pump. And we'll go to the pictures. Some people have electric hot water, but they have what the tradesperson who visits your house will call a resistive system. And basically it's just like a kettle. You can see in the picture on the left. But if you get a big enough kettle, like the picture in the middle, then that can make hot water for the kitchen and the shower. And then, of course, you might have one of those solar absorbers that uses electricity. So we're not talking about these systems. These are the old systems. Probably your grandparents had those in the roof of the house, running off the brown coal from Morwell. So we go to the next one. What you do have in your house is 2 heat pumps, I'm betting. So one is more commonly known as a refrigerator, and we're looking at the back of the refrigerator here, and you can see it's like it's an all-in-one system. There's the condenser coils, there's the motor, there's the bits and pieces underneath, but it's all in one box. And the heat pump in that system is keeping the inside of the box cold and keeping your milk cold. And then it blows the warm air out into the kitchen. And then you've got another heat pump in the living room, and it blows out warm air in the winter and cold air in the summer. But it's in 2 pieces, and the fan and the compressor are mounted outside, and the other part of it is mounted inside. So if we go to the next one. So that's how hot water works as well. You can buy an all-in-one system where there's a tank and the coils. You can see the coils here. They're going round and round instead of side to side. And the compressor sits on top of it. And then on the right-hand side, there's the split system. As Gus said, it looks very like an air conditioner. There's the condenser on the left and the hot water in the tank on the right. So we'll be talking about all-in-ones and splits. So that's a bit of jargon, free jargon for tonight coming to the webinar. Okay. Now, the great thing about the heat pump hot water system is if you organise yourself, it can run for free. So when they're running, they only need a couple of hours to heat up the water because they have a timer on them, and you just set the timer. Mine's got a very primitive timer, and I set it at midday, and it runs at midday, and then when daylight saving comes along, it runs at 1 o'clock. But that's the same thing. My solar panels feed the power into the heat pump for the couple of hours. You can see in the middle picture that the sun is filling my battery. That's the yellow. And then the yellow disappears because these solar panels heat the water, and then the yellow reappears when the hot water's done its job. Now, if you're like Tim, you don't have solar panels, you do have the option of a couple of hours of free power. Now, your electricity retailer may already offer that, but they'll have to offer that in the middle of the year because that's going to be a new rule. So you can be like me and have your hot water for free. So have you got one of those plans, Tim, or did you decide just to because it doesn't actually cost that much to run the meat, you know.
No, we don't have one of those plans, but yeah, the for the electrically minded out there, the units take about 4 amps, which is a very small, or 1 kilowatt per hour. So it's a very small amount of electricity to power them, and that's why we like them, because they're so efficient. So we like electric hot water, the old kettles that you mentioned, Harry, because they're electric, but they're very energy hungry, whereas the heat
Yeah.
pumps, through that process of using a refrigerant and compressing that refrigerant and sucking heat out of the air and then amplifying that heat basically and pumping it into the water. It's a super efficient process. So another way to think about that, another term or another jargon term, is the coefficient of performance. So it's basically the efficiency of different systems. And a really simple way to think about that is basically for every dollar of energy you spend on a heat pump, be it a heat pump hot water or be it a heat pump like a split system, often you can get $3 or $4 or $5 worth of heat out from that process. So it's a super efficient process, which really doesn't require a lot of electricity, which is why we like them.
Yeah, and I guess the rule of thumb I have is that, you know, it might take you 3 or 4, maybe even 5 units of power to heat the hot water for the day, but with your kettle system, it might take you 14 units of power. So you can see that coefficient of performance, because as they taught me back in school, 5 is better than 14, especially when you have to pay for each one of them. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. It's not only the bill, because don't forget the rebates. The government's giving you money at the moment. That government there, the one in Canberra and also the one in Spring Street. And the money from Canberra is about $1,000, and it's about $1,400 you can get from Victoria, but it depends what you buy, depends what your income is, terms and conditions apply, batteries not included, you know, so you need to check on that. But what I say to people is the rebates are great, they'll cover the installation. Is that fair, Tim, or is that a little bit too glib?
Yeah, you could term it like that. Yeah, they cover the installation. There's still a cost associated with the units, obviously, but the rebates do make a big difference. So it depends on what make and model and eligibility, like you said, but often it can cover more than 50%. I think the key one for listeners there is it's called the Solar Victoria Hot Water Rebate, and it's means tested. So most people are eligible for that if their home is worth less than $3 million on their rates notice, and the combined household income is less than $210,000 a year, and they're an owner occupier. So if you get that one, you'll get that rebate as well, which brings the price down further.
Yeah. So and your installer will handle all of that paperwork. Tim loves the paperwork, and in fact that's why he went into the business, really, isn't it? To do lots of paperwork.
Loves a strong word, Harry.
Yeah, so don't forget the rebates. So now we'll look a bit more at the money, because you will get a rebate, but you're going to have to buy the unit. And so how long until I get my money back is a perfectly reasonable question. So I've got go to the next one. Thanks, Julian. So there's lots of ways to divide up the different units you can buy. And in this webinar, we're going to talk about basic ones, better ones, and best ones. And you're familiar with that. You know, there's maybe a basic car like, I don't know, a Suzuki, and then there's a better car like a Toyota, and then there's a best car, which might be, I don't know, BMW or something. So it's the same with hot water heat pumps. You can buy cheap and cheerful, and you can buy in the middle, and you can get a really nice one. And different people choose different ones in that. It depends, you know, how you're thinking in the short term, or you're thinking in the long term. That'll make a difference in how much you spend. So that's my pitch. Tim, what do you say? What does the real person say when he has to make a sale and help people make a good decision that they won't regret?
I think there's an argument that there's no such thing as a bad heat pump, because if there's a choice between a heat pump that is affordable versus installing another gas unit, for example, I would always go for the more affordable heat pump, because we don't want to sign up to gas for another 15 years by installing a new gas appliance. So in that view, there's no such thing as a bad heat pump, but there are better ones in the middle, which I think, in a balanced kind of way, they're just a bit more reliable. So yeah, we've installed 750. I'm not going to claim that nothing's ever gone wrong with any of those. Things do go wrong. It's just a matter of how the company, the manufacturer, how that deals with it, how your installer deals with it,
Yes.
and I guess what you're signing up to with that initial heat pump that you choose.
Yeah, and the cheaper one. Well, we'll talk a bit about that. But now let's talk about. Okay, so I don't know, you're looking at those bars and you're thinking, I'm probably in this group, I'm probably in that group. But let's go on to the next slide. So let's say you sit right in the middle and you say, I'm prepared to spend $2,000. And we remember we're using Tim as our example. He's saving $600. So basically 3 grand finals will go past. Hopefully your team will win one of them. And after that period, then you will have paid off the basic unit. But there's more if we go on to the next one. So payback is getting the money back from the purchase. But then, as Tim was saying before about the getting off gas altogether, you're saving that $600 long after you've paid off the unit. And you're going to, here I'm estimating that over 10 years, you're going to receive $6,000 back from this. You'll spend $2,000 up front, you get $6,000 back. And there are lots of people who would be very happy with that investment. And you've got a chance to make it and bolt it onto your house.
A common question we get, Harry, is how long do these things last?
Yeah.
And look, it's hard to answer definitively. Obviously, it's going to vary from scenario to scenario. But my kind of rule of thumb with electronics and appliances, whether it's right or wrong, is kind of double the warranty. So, split systems, a Panasonic or a Daikin comes with a 5-year warranty, but you're obviously hoping you get longer than 5 years for a nice new Daikin split system. So most of the mid-market units in heat pumps come with at least a 5-year warranty. So I think you're hoping to get at least 10 years. And some of those other ones towards the other end, the more premium end, they might come with up to a 15-year warranty on the tank, or say 10 years on the compressor. So hopefully with those ones, you're spending a bit more. And what are you spending for? And we can go into that. But one of the things is that expected longevity. So for some systems, probably the more expensive ones, you're hoping to get upwards of 20 years. And I guess one interesting data point is we get people coming to us that installed a heat pump 15 years ago or so, and it's just reached end of life, and now they're looking to replace it. We did one a couple of weeks ago near Dalesford, and it's good to see that some of those have lasted a good chunk of time.
Yes. And I've talked to some tank people who, there's people making tanks in the Latrobe Valley, and they talk about their tanks having lasted more than 30 years, So the obviously the compressor that's the moving part and is more likely to wear out sooner. But I think you can be comfortable that you get 10 years out of it. Okay, so let's go on. Our investment summary is do it now. So people say to me, well, that's all very interesting, Harry. It's terribly exciting. And I'll just wait until mine breaks. And the problem with that argument is, okay, it postpones all the difficulties and all the thinking and decisions. But every day that you postpone, that money is leaking out through the gas hot water system. So procrastinate later is my advice. Do you get people like, tell me, let's say I'm going to procrastinate, and then suddenly it's going to happen on Saturday night, on the weekend of a public holiday, and my old gas hot water is going to go belly up, and suddenly I'm having cold showers. And I've got this number of this guy, Tim Johnson, and I ring him and say, Tim, quick, fix me a heat pump in 30 minutes. Can you do it?
I guarantee it'll happen on a Friday afternoon. 50% of those calls happen on a Friday afternoon. But it's funny how things work out. Look, a lot of installers are set up for this. We get the question quite frequently. I've got no hot water. What can you do? Often it depends on just the lay of the land, how we've got stock, and usually we can install one in 1 to 3 days. Another little interesting thing there is that peak hot water season is in winter, and that's because temperatures drop and the old units have to work harder. Whether it's a gas unit or whatever the unit it is, they've got to work harder because there's more heating to do. And that's when we see a lot more, and we call them emergencies. It's a very dramatic term, but they're emergency installation. And that's when you see a lot more of those sorts of calls. So most installers will be set up to respond to them, but it's also from the customer's point of view. Have you done your research? Are you someone that likes to do, my dad, every time he bought an appliance, he'd research it for 6 months before he actually bought something, and it probably his research was outdated by the time he actually acted on it. So I guess people would move at different speeds, and then people have different sensitivities to no hot water. Some people will be fine with it, go and shower at their gym, but some will think the world's over and then they need it in within 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I interrupted you, but let's take that second case. I'm highly sensitive to having a cold shower. I'm not prepared to go to the gym. This is the world has ended. You're going to give me you're going to deal gently with me, aren't you? You're going to let me down and say I can't be here today. I can't fit it today. What's a reasonable time? Is it like 2 days or 3 days? Or you get most of them done in 3 days.
1 to 3 business days. We can generally move pretty quickly.
So from that Friday night, it goes bang. Saturday's no good. Sunday's no good. Monday's a public holiday, and then we're looking at Thursday. So so
we always do what we can, but it is better to
of course.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about actual incidents here, but I guess I'm trying to make the point. If you're going to go through the valley of death, the winter when your old system is stressed, you're much better to knock it off early, make the decisions when you're not under stress, book it in, pull the thing out before it actually dies on you, and get the new one going and start the savings.
And frequently we'll get customers say, oh, look, it's leaking, or it's making some funny noises, or it's, it loses its heat, but then it sort of came back the other day. And so these are the sort of signs we can look at. And I'm obviously highly biased, but spending a couple of $100 to fix something that is on its way out seems to me that money would be better spent on making the next step.
Okay. So let's go into the showroom and see what they've got on the showroom floor. And we're now going to talk a bit about choosing one of these things, because we've got to choose whether we buy this company's or that company's. And so these are the same bars we talked about before when we were talking about the money. And there's basic units, there's better units, and then there's the best units. People have different categories. Some people say there's 4 categories or 6, or have different names for them. But for tonight, we'll just say these are the 3. So let's go on to the next one. Generally, as Tim was saying before, the more you pay, it's probably going to last longer. It's probably going to be more efficient. It's not going to be as noisy, but you'll pay more. And we're used to making these decisions and trade-offs. So we go to the next one. One of the invisible things that you get when you buy a better or a best one is you get the better installers. So we need to talk to you a bit about that. We'll talk about the better installers, because the better installers like to do a good job, and they also, their business managers tell them you don't want to be going back and fixing things. So the better installers like to do a good install, and they like to do it with a good unit, and then they like to give you an invoice and get on to the next job. Do you have any sort of company rules around, that? Do you try and get it all wrapped up quite quickly, or what's your...
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head before. No one wants us coming back to the job. We don't want to go back to the job. The customer doesn't want to go back to the job, and obviously we will if we need to. But it's just a balance of things are going to go wrong from time to time, and whether it's an Aquatech issue, an issue with the unit, or whether it's a workmanship issue. But yeah, you do. I guess the company rule is just installing something that we are sort of happy to put our name to, because effectively if the customer has a bad experience, whether it's the product we install or whether it's something we've done, that's going to come back to our reputation, and good business practices. We want to keep our customers happy.
Yeah. So let's go to the next one, because as you know, there are scammers out there trying to take money out of your bank account, and there's scammers out there trying to take money from you through heat pumps. And the cowboy installers, not every person who's installing a basic unit is a cowboy installer, but none of the cowboy installers are installing excellent units. So you just got to be aware of snakes. And as Tim said, his name is on this, but there's a lot of people doing the installs who are just contractors. They're working for big, overarching, I won't mention names, but you know these big companies that they've got a number that's the same all over Australia, and they've got contractors working for them. And so you just need to be cautious about that. You get a very good price out of them, but you just need to be cautious. Okay, we go to the next one. I got two examples here. These two companies got pulled over by the regulator. They did things that were sufficiently out of bounds to call them to be called up and named. So I just want to emphasize that be careful if you're down the shallow end, because there's some funny stuff going on. Okay. We'll go to the next slide. And here we're actually going to name some names. And of course, I don't know, how many brands are there, Tim? There must be 30 or 40. It does my head in when I try and do lists of the number of heat pumps.
It's a changing market as well. It seems like there's a lot of new entrants coming to the market. I'd say in terms of the reputable brands, there's probably less than 10. There's probably 20 or 30 out there now. A lot of new brands coming to market, because I think everyone comes back to that slide you put up before about that sort of explosion in heat pump hot water popularity. So yeah, bit of a mix.
So we haven't got all the good ones or the ones that we might mention here, but we've only got a certain amount of real estate on the screen. So this isn't an exclusive list. It's just some examples. And it's arguable. We had plenty of discussions as we were putting this slide together. Oh no, I don't think we should have that one. But illustratively, lots of people are putting in the emeralds. I would call them basic. And then you get up into the better group and you get the iStores and the Aquatechs and Apricus. And then we were talking before, I think, Tim, you even mentioned that the Japanese compressors, the split systems, these are the ones that you can expect a much longer life out of and a much bigger bill to buy them.
Yeah, so we've put together a framework of 4 things to look at, Harry, to analyse heat pump hot water units. And so 1 is cost, 2 is reliability. And what do you look at with reliability? You look at reviews, you look at previous customers, you look at warranties, because that's sort of the company backing it. How much do they back do they back their product? 3 is the refrigerant, which has sort of homogenized a little bit. There used to be a wide variety of different refrigerants, some which were a lot worse for the environment, but most of them are carbon dioxide, which is what Reclaim uses, which is kind of like the gold standard of refrigerants in the heat pump hot water space, which is a little bit ironic because we've got too much carbon dioxide. And propane, which is R290, which a lot of these other units use. And so what happened is iStore, for example, used to use R134A, which is not as good for the environment, but the rebate agencies
by thousands of multiples, yes.
But the rebate agencies came out and said that they have a lot of power, because if your product is not eligible for the rebates, it's not going to be competitive on the market. So a lot of the refrigerants are similar these days. And then the 4th factor to look at is ongoing maintenance of the unit as well. So some units will be a bit easier to maintain ongoing. Some units will need a little bit more checking as we go.
Yeah. And look, it's like a lot of buying decisions. It's highly complex. As Tim said, there's a lot of new products coming onto the market. Chances are, 2 months after you've bought yours, you'll find someone who's got one with it's got its own TV on the front or something, and you wish you bought that, but that's just the way it is. The thing is just to get a good one that will meet your needs. Let's go on to the next slide. And this is like Tim talked about his 4 things, but here's another company. Don't necessarily agree with them, but they've got a really nice, as a consultant, I always like a 4-box matrix, but they've got, they make an interesting point here. Like we've talked about the cheap and poor quality ones you've got to be careful of. And then the other grey box is that they're expensive and poor. In other words, they're an okay unit perhaps, but the price is very high for an okay unit. So the Steebles, I believe, come from Europe, and up until recently they've had a tariff on them. So that has made them a bit more expensive than perhaps their natural competitors. And then you get the cheap and goods, and then you get the expensive and goods. So that's just another way when you're putting together your shopping list and doing your, okay, I like this one better than that one. That's another way to think about it. Here's a further way to think about it in the next slide. So Electrify Boroondara and Electrify Yarra have a list of installers who do a good job, and we've heard good stories about. And they have on their websites the units that they install. And this isn't all of the units they install, but what you can see here is that a lot of them are putting in Aquatechs and Apricus and Reclaim. So, you know, they're perhaps the ones you can look at and then measure some of the other ones against that. And again, this is not definitive. As Tim said, there's also good stuff out there and new ones coming onto the market all the time. But I think we, having done a bit of a sort of version of choice best buys, let's move into mythbusters, because there's it's like, you know, people think you can't drive through a puddle in an electric vehicle, and that's always a bit funny, but there's plenty of myths around hot water as well. So Julian, can you, this is the myth is I can't have a hot water heat pump because it's too noisy, and here's a chromogen in action. Let me just hit. So that was at the caravan park. Wasn't pulse. I'm hearing it pulsing, but anyway, it's quite loud. And then here's the next one is my one. The put the noise right up and hit the button. And so that's my one at home. And one day, a friend said, "Do you find it noisy?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you think? It's running now." So they hadn't realized it was running. So I don't think that's the most successful video experiment we've ever done. But Tim, tell me about noise and what you do with myth busting the noise question.
Yeah, look, noise is a really common question we get, and for good reason. You don't want to install something and it might be cheaper to run and it might be great for the environment, but it just makes a racket and just annoys you. But the good news is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and in this case, we've done 750 installations or thereabouts, and I think we've had 2 noise complaints. One was because the lady set a timer to come on at 2 a.m. for some reason, and it was outside her daughter's bedroom window. So we fixed the timer, problem solved. The other one was, let's say, a slightly difficult customer who we installed it, and it was fine for 6 months, and then all of a sudden it was a huge issue. And just like Gus said, we actually adjusted the fan speed on his to reduce that noise a little bit, which you can do on the Aquatech units. So why noise is not a huge issue is a couple of reasons. One is the actual noise of the units themselves ranges between, say, 37 decibels, which is probably what yours is, Harry, the Sandon and the Reclaims, the premium units, and that's one thing you're paying for with that more expensive units, to sort of 45 to 50 decibels, and that might be some of the cheaper units. To put that in comparison, most compressors of air conditioning units, the outdoor unit of a split system, they're rated at upwards of 60 decibels. So as I think Gus said in his video, the noise is comparable to what we already know. The second thing there is we also need to think about how we run our heat pump hot water unit. And we've touched on this before, Harry, with the timers and running it during the middle of the day. So my heat pump's on a timer between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. So that's when noise is less likely to be an issue. And I actually spoke today with a customer who's a shift worker. So I went into my spiel about 11 to 3, and she said, "Well, that may not work for me because I'm all over the place, working different shifts." And I said, "Well, what we could do is we could probably run it from, say, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., which may be less ideal because that's when electricity prices generally go up, because that's when a lot of people are using their electricity in the wholesale market. But if that's what works for her, then that's, you can make that work." So there's been very few practical problems with noise. And then I guess if you're particularly worried about noise, well, then we can look at the more premium units where we've had a number of customers say, they're standing in front of their reclaim unit and they can't tell if it's on. And reclaim call it whisper quiet, and it is. So that's, as I said, that is an option if people are particularly worried about the noise side of things.
And I think, the myth arose in the days when people didn't know they had timers and they left them running at night outside the bedroom and that sort of thing. So the timer is your friend, even if you've got a basic unit.
There are more than one reason, just the solar to run it during the middle of the day, and noise is one of those reasons.
Okay, we've got a couple more Mythbusters in this section. Oh, are we done noise? We just slide forward to the next one. So I've heard people say, I don't want a heat pump. There'll be a blackout and then I'll have cold showers. What do you say? Okay, I'm bowling and you're batting. What do you say to that one?
Yeah, look, it's a valid concern. It really depends when the blackout is. So if we think about that timer and how we've set up our heat pump to run between 11 and 3, let's just step through that. So for my heat pump at 3 p.m, we've got a full tank of hot water, plenty of hot water in the afternoon and evening. It's going to lose a little bit of heat overnight, and there should be enough left over for the morning showers. Now, if there's not, time after time, I'm obviously going to change those settings so that there is.
Yes.
And with my heat pump, there is, so we're not having any issues with it. But if we work through that, if the blackout occurs at 10 a.m. when our tank is less full of hot water, and then there's no electricity to run that next heating cycle, yes, we may not have a lot of hot water left over. If the blackout happens at 5 p.m. after we've gone through the heating cycle, because it is a tank of thermal energy is just sitting there, we're going to be fine. And I'm not a blackout expert, but I understand most of them happen in the afternoon, summer, when everyone's running their air conditioners and it's very, very hot. And generally blackouts don't go on for days. So it's probably not going to be an issue, but I guess it could be. It could be. Okay. So I think you've patted the ball back down the pitch to me on that one. Yeah. More defensive. I've heard of people who've, someone was telling me they were in Canberra and they had 3 days without power, but they had a really well insulated tank and they had hot water all through that time because it had heated 3 days before. So and you can probably ration it so that you know what's going to happen. Okay, so here's my next ball. They take up too much space. I can't have one of these things. I've got an instant gas. It just lives up on the wall. Nobody sees it. And now you want me to put this great big rocket in my backyard. Yeah, look, you've hit me on the pads there, Harry, and we're waiting for the umpire's decision, and it may go in my favour or it may not. So one of the realities of heat pumps is they're big. The typical heat pump is about a 600 mil diameter, 1.6 to 2 meters tall. They're a tank of hot water to start with. Heat pumps are generally larger than our gas counterparts because we want to store more hot water and operate it like we've talked about. So it's generally a bigger tank, and then they've compressor on the top or separate compressor. So Fitzroy, some of these suburbs which are more built up, there might be access issues just getting the thing in. They're not always the best. They're not always a viable solution, and we have had I'd say probably less than 5% of cases of customers coming to us and saying, look, I want to install a heat pump, and it's actually going to block access down the side of the house. And the way I often describe that is it depends what you've got already. If you've got an instant gas hot water unit which sits on the wall and it's quite small, and you put a heat pump there, well then yes, you're probably not going to block your access to be able to walk past it, but it might be hard to get the wheelbarrow past it. If it's a gas tank, then it's already taking up a bit of footprint. It might be 450 or 500 mil in size. So the heat pump's not going to be a lot larger. But some cases we can move it. We could maybe install it somewhere else. That's going to put up the installation cost a little bit. But there are cases where it doesn't work. Apartments, sometimes they don't work. Yes. So there are some cases where a heat pump is not viable, and then we can look at other electric options. Yeah, cool. Okay, well, we'll go upstairs to the third umpire and see what they say on that one. I think it depends in each case, doesn't it? And we talked about, don't wait till the old one breaks before. So I'm going to skip that one and we'll move forward to options and configurations.
And again, back to our little diagram. So repeating what we've said before, but sometimes that's useful to repeat things. So you can get the all-in-ones, and they're cheaper, and they take up less space perhaps. There's a faster install, and the split system's longer lasting, quieter, more efficient, more flexible installation. You can move that compressor around just like with an aircon. They can have more insulation in the tank, and you don't have, if the compressor needs replacing, you don't have to replace the tank as well. So one of your options is to go for all-in-one or split. We go on to the next slide. There's a bewildering quantity of tanks. There seems to be every possible combination of litres and heights and diameters. But basically, the rule of thumb seems to be that if you've got 3 bedrooms, you need 300 litres. If you've got one person living in a 3-bedroom house, you still need 300 litres because there's 3 bedrooms. And so what do you say to people about tank size, Tim?
It's actually changed a little bit. It used to be 50 litres of hot water per person per day. Now it's sort of upped it a little bit to 70 litres per person per day. We do want to look at the number of bedrooms as well. I mean, and that really is up to the individual. Some people will say, yeah, I'm one person in a 4-bedroom house and I don't care what the next owner has to deal with.
Yes.
So they might put in a smaller unit which will serve them. Most people are not like that. Most people will say, look, we want to have the right unit for the next owner as well. So yeah, I'd say if we look at the manufacturers as well, that's also a good place to start, because if you want to reclaim, which is the premium unit, their most common size is a 315 litre unit, and the 250 litre unit, which is the size down, it's like $100 cheaper. So yeah, often people just get the 315.
Yes.
iStores, Aquatechs, Apricuses, their main size is the 270 litre. So that's kind of the standard size for your 4-person household. The big question there is, how do you use your hot water? We installed one for a 2-person household. It was a 225 litre unit, so we thought there was plenty, and they told me they were running out of hot water. I said, what are you doing? And they're having two people, a lady and a daughter, and they're showering for half an hour each, washing their hair. So maybe I should have that. Well, I do have that conversation earlier now to understand how people are using their hot water. You can always change the settings to make it work a little bit more than just that narrow timer during the middle of the day. So there are levers you can pull if you're not getting enough hot water. But it's best to have a conversation with your installer and work out how you use your hot water and getting a size that's going to serve you well.
And it sounds like you're better to err on the slightly bigger side than the slightly smaller side.
No one ever complained of having too much hot water, Harry.
Yeah, that's true. Although I was listening to the Hepburn people, they were doing a hot water webinar, and they said, back in the days, in that sort of Dalesford area, people had large solar systems, and they were using their hot water tank as a form of battery. And the installers on that webinar were saying, well, these days we fit, they've sort of come down to 100 litres a bedroom because they don't need to use the hot water for that purpose anymore. So good. And let's go on to the other options. You don't get the option of sunroofs or anything like that, but you do get the option of controlling it with Wi-Fi. And I couldn't understand why anybody would want Wi-Fi when you can just walk out the door and press the unit. And then I was talking to somebody who put them in their house down at the beach, and so that makes perfect sense. You turn the unit off when you leave the beach house, and then maybe you're heading down, you're going to head down on Friday evening, and so you fire the thing up, and so that it runs Friday midday, and the hot water's waiting for you when you get there. So I had to be less skeptical about Wi-Fi's. What's the ratio of Wi-Fi's to sort of buttons on the machine for your customers?
I'm not sure if we actually spoke about Wi-Fi, Harry, if we've talked about that previously, but I agree with you. I mean, how many apps have I got on my phone which I don't use? And you use, I think, was it 90% of apps you download you use it once and you never use it again. So look, Wi-Fi and the holiday house is a great example where it's actually quite practical. But if you look at all the manufacturer websites, just about all of them say, look at us, we've got Wi-Fi for our hot water. It will be useful for that initial setup. So when we install a unit, we just want to let it run for a couple of days. Don't put any settings on it. Just make sure everything's working fine. And then a couple of days later, we can start to put some settings on it with that timer. And as I sort of touched on before, we suggest an iterative approach there. So if that narrow timer from 11 to 3 is working well, then you don't need to do anything else. But if it's not giving you enough hot water, we can extend that timer, we can change the settings. And that's where Wi-Fi might be helpful, to save you going outside.
Or you could do it at work. Someone could ring you up from work and adjust the settings. And
look, a lot of our customers go, oh, look, it's 37 degrees currently and it's on its way up. So people can get quite invested as the unit has just been installed. But I think 6-12 months later, I think most people are not going to be too fussed about what the temperature of their hot water unit is, as long as it's hot enough for a shower. So I think Wi-Fi is a little bit overrated.
Yeah. Okay. And the other thing I would say is I've tried to help people with timers on a few of the units that will remain nameless, but it was like trying to break into a safe to work out which buttons to press. And, so there's a usability challenge ahead of the industry to come up with easily usable timers, but you only do it once and then it runs. Once you've got it how you want it. Okay. So we've got an over of Mythbusters, and we're coming to the end of our conversation, but it's going to continue because we're going to David's going to talk about his install. Okay, so I'm going to bowl 3 balls at you. The first one is, I'm not going to get a hot water heat pump because the pressure's lower. I love my gas system. It's great. I love my hot showers in the morning, but those things have lower pressure.
Yeah, it's a nice little googly you've bowled me there, Harry. And it's one I'm going to have to watch closely. So pressure, there can be an issue with new technology and old pipework, effectively. So there's a new plumbing regulation where anytime you do major plumbing to your house, you need to check that the pressure coming into the property is less than 500 kPa. And if it's not, we need to install a pressure reduction valve, which reduces that pressure. So we've had a case, it was in Carlton, for example, where it was a very old house. We installed the units, and the customer said that there was a noticeable drop in pressure. So look, in some cases, and so what we did was we actually increased the pressure above the warranty threshold, so we increased it to 600 kPa for that Aquatech unit, because that's what the customer wanted. Now, that is not the warranty guidelines, but they wanted, that's what they wanted in that particular case. In the vast majority of cases, it's not really an issue, but I guess the defensive stroke play to that one is, if you are having pressure, if you hear of someone saying, oh, I've got a heat pump, it's terrible because my pressure dropped, there are things you can do to fix that. And it's not necessarily the heat pump, it's more new technology fitting in with old world infrastructure.
100-year-old water pipes in Carlton or whatever. So, okay, my next ball is, I don't want one of these heat pumps because they're unreliable, whereas gas is totally reliable, and these things are completely unreliable.
I'm liking the cricket analogy. I don't know if you know that cricket, Harry. But this
I do.
I'm smashing you for 6 there. They're reliable. I mean, powerhouse, 750 installations later. We don't have customers calling us every day saying my hot water's gone out. It's more just a case of, again, you might have issues come up like pressure or cold water. We'll talk about that next. Or, I've run out of hot water because the timer was too narrow. So things you've got to work through. But the reliability and your typical, may I say it, older fashioned plumber who's your local plumber, you call up and say, oh, hey, what do you think about heat pumps? Oh, no, they're not reliable. They cost a fortune. They're no good. It's just they haven't brought themselves up to speed with the fact that it actually works very well.
Yeah, I think that's very good. Be very careful about plumbers. They're not in favour of heat pumps because the other mob are putting them in, and the plumbers are losing their old gas hot water jobs. So don't take advice about heat pumps from plumbers. It would be my principle. Okay, so I'm at the end of my run up and I'm coming in now. You know, the water's colder. I hate it. I want my old gas one back again. You know.
Yes, so I think I can defend that one pretty easily. When we install a new hot water system these days, we have to install what's called a tempering valve, and that is to stop ourselves from burning ourselves with the hot water. So
Right.
my mother-in-law has a place down in Torquay, has an old unit, no tempering valve. Every time I turn it on hot, I burn myself because I forget that she doesn't have a tempering valve. So heat pumps heat water generally up to 60 degrees. 60 degrees is very, very hot. That's going to burn you. And so that's a regulation or a code thing that has come in. I'm not sure exactly when, but more recently. And basically it says a tempering valve will drop the water down to 50 degrees. Now, 50 degrees
Sort
is
of like a mixing valve that mixes
valve.
a bit of
Yeah,
cold.
it mixes the hot and the cold so that it comes out at no more than 50. And by the time it actually gets to your shower, it's probably going to be 45. Or whatever that looks like, which is going to still be hot enough. So again, if you've heard that case of, oh, heat pumps, they're no good, the water's cold, it might be colder than what you've had previously. One customer we had who I loved, he was saying, oh, the water's lukewarm, and I actually spoke to the plumber that referred me to him, and he said, no, his name is Tim as well. I've known Tim for years. They just love boiling hot water. They're a bit more old fashioned, and they just are used to really, really hot water. So what you can do on that is, it's your unit, it's your tempering valve. You can actually adjust that to let more hot water or less cold water mix in with that, and adjust it so it gets hotter. I didn't say this, but it's your unit. I'm sure you could get the tempering valve removed. We have to install it with one in it, but if it was really an issue, you could always get that tempering valve removed, and it will restore it to that 60 degrees, which is certainly hot enough.
And that'd be unwise, wouldn't it? Because probably if you're used to having scalding water and really having the cold tap on, and then you get the heat pump and you only have to put the cold tap on not as much, you might think that the water's not as hot when actually what it is, you're just not turning the cold tap as much. So I think you just need to get used to it.
Yes, I agree.
Good. Okay. So don't go away, Tim, because we've got more difficult questions for you at the end. But we're going to go into the sort of, I suppose it's the next part of this. So if you're interested in finding out more about hot water and you want to make a good decision, you can always have a phone call with someone from Electrify Yarra. If it's going to be about hot water, it's going to be with me. So we go on to the next slide. So you can use that email or use that QR code if you're fast with your phone or you're watching the recording. And we're happy to speak to you, even if you live outside the city of Yarra, because we all need to get into heat pump hot water systems. It's not just people in the city of Yarra. So I'm going to hand over now to David, because David's going to talk about his decisions and how he sorted through all this stuff that Tim and I have been talking about.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I think, and the next one again, please. The timeline, because this all happened fairly quickly. I moved into my new home in April 2025 with the intention of going all electric. I wasn't intending to rush it though. But my first move was to replace the gas ducted heating with reverse cycle air conditioning, and to upgrade my switchboard ready for other electrification. The switchboard upgrade highlighted a safety issue with my gas cooker. Seems a bit unfair that the electricity did in my gas cooker, but I had to replace that. The government then introduced the battery incentive, so I got new solar panels and a battery, and that didn't leave a lot left. And we've seen the economics. It just left the solar water heater boosted by gas. In early May, I accepted a quote for a new Econova hot water heat pump. I've read in the chat that Glenn Drover got a better price and installed almost instantly, but anyway, I was happy. Perhaps the next slide, please. Okay, how did I choose? I asked several installers for quotes. I didn't pick the cheapest, but I went with a trusted installer, and the install cost was 1,500. The trusted installer bit proved to be very important. So I'll explain that on the next slide. You could, okay, maybe not on the next slide. Maybe I'll explain it now. I had some problems. Actually, no, it is on a later slide. So why did I pick Econova? A 2-year payback and a 5-year warranty. With solar panels, running costs would be minimal. Even better, I signed up with Glowbird and now have 3 hours of free electricity every day. So even if the sun isn't shining, or I can get free electricity to run my heat pump. So my operating costs are zero. With a warranty period of 5 years and a payback of 2 years, it seems a pretty safe investment for me. And I'm glad Tim said that you can expect it to last probably twice your warranty period. I'm hoping for at least 10 years out of this, and I hope my saving will be nice and substantial by then, and probably more than enough to buy a new one if I need to. But it hasn't been without problems. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay. So this was a risk assessment, but I can expect at least 10 years. I'd expect the price of heat pump hot water systems will fall in the next 10 years. I may be wrong, but it's my choice. I've had problems. The heat pump used to turn off on occasions, meaning cold showers. The problem has now been fixed, thanks to the installer. I think if I had not picked a trusted installer, I might have been in problems. But it's fixed, and I'm happy with my choice. I would point out that I bought one of the top of the range batteries, but I'm having problems with my installer there. So, it's good if you can get a reference, but there are people out there you can't trust. And I think that's the end of mine. Do you want next slide?
But it looks like you're over to me now. So hi, I'm Russell from Electrify Boroondara, as it says, and as I think Harry said earlier, we found with a little bit of work we did a few years ago that typically the plumbers were very good at saying, yes, I'll replace your broken hot water system with another gas one. I've got one right on the back of the truck. In fact, we heard that the plumbers and gas fitters union were actually dictating that approach to some of their plumbers. That even if your pesky customer insists that you've got you install the heat pump, then we want you to install gas. We want you to keep us gas fitters in business. So we came up with this concept called Hot Water Hub. Next slide, please, Julian. And this was all about the fact that, as Tim says, typically your gas hot water is going to die in winter. It's usually at 7 o'clock in the morning in July when it's about 5 degrees outside and it's lovely and drizzly, and you're standing outside after having a cold shower and wondering what you're going to do next. So most of us would just typically either go to the fridge magnet that some friendly plumber has put in the letterbox in the past 6 months and phone them, or just Google emergency hot water for Boroondara in our case, or in whatever suburb. And typically that would point you to your local plumber, and he would historically replace your old gas unit with an existing unit. So what we did is we came up with this weatherproof sticker, as you can see on the photo there, to stick on your old gas hot water system. So When you're standing in the rain on an August morning, wondering what you're going to do with hot water, you scan this QR code. Next slide, please, Julie. And we will show you a list of installers in your area that will do an emergency or a fast swap over of hot water systems. And you can see that when I scraped these three, that Tim and Powerhouse were one of the 5 random installers that came up there. So we've got a bunch of installers that we have. We're not necessarily endorsing, but basically we know they serve the district. And we know that they don't have a bad name, as Harry pointed out before, and that they will do quite responsive hot water systems. Thanks, Julian. We've improved our Hot Water Hub, our web page, which you can go to via the link there, and it's been in the chat a little bit, with a whole bunch of information about how to go through the bewildering list of what products are available, what might suit you. So Tim and Harry have spoken about sizing, spoken about good, better, best, spoken about split versus integrated units. And what we do is we don't recommend, we basically filter on all of the Victorian Solar Victoria endorsed products according to a few different criteria, and then give you a list of here are some products and here's some information about them. You can also go there to find more about installers as well. Thank you. Next. Of course, if you've got any issue, there's a contact us form there as well that will get one of our friendly people to get back to you and hopefully be able to resolve some of your issues if you haven't learned everything you need to know now. Thanks. I think maybe I'll stay online, and David and I have been answering a bunch of questions as they've been coming online. So I'm going to throw you some curved baseballs, Tim, at the moment. So a few questions which I don't know whether you've been scanning the Q&A, but there's a bunch of questions which I've answered and said, hey, Tim probably knows better about this. So let's go through maybe half a dozen. So Alan has asked about evacuated tubes and being able to use a heat pump as a booster. And I said, yeah, probably not, because heat pumps are really good for heating cold water into hot water, but coming off evacuated tubes, sometimes it's hot water, sometimes it's cold water, sometimes it's lukewarm water, and heat pumps don't necessarily do a good job of boosting.
Yeah, great. It's Russell, great question as well. So evacuated tubes, what that means for those that aren't aware, it's basically solar hot water on the roof. So it might be evacuated tubes. It might even be a solar panel, which then heats water and directs that into a tank. And the question we do get from time to time is, well, if that's still working and that's heating the water, then why can't we pump that water into the heat pump, and then the heat pump doesn't have to work as much? And that sounds great in theory, but Russell, you are correct. And the bigger problem with that is the manufacturer warranty as well. So we've spoken to Reclaim about that and Aquatech about that. And the sensors are designed to have cold water coming in and not hot water. And particularly some solar hot water in the middle of summer can get very, very hot. And you're likely going to void your warranty. So it can make sense, but it's just one of those things that in practice it doesn't happen.
That almost segues beautifully onto a question from Andrew about using a heat pump for both hydronic and hot water in the one thing, which I think is, I answered and said, that's the thing in North America, in the Northern Hemisphere, in Europe. But such things aren't available here, probably because much less hydronic here.
Yes, I could talk for a long time on this one. So the short
I'll give
answer.
you 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. The short answer is no. I went to All Energy Expo in October last year. I spoke for a long time with Panasonic about their combined heat pump hydronic and heat pump hot water unit and how great it was. I then spoke to an installer who they recommended me to, and they said, yeah, it sounds great, doesn't work. And the reason why is because when we're heating water for the hydronic side of things, it has to heat very hot. And when we're heating hot water for the hot water side of things, it doesn't need to heat as hot. So you've kind of got a mismatch on how hard the system has to work. And whilst it does exist, so Panasonic, Stiebel Eltron, they do have them. Again, I spoke to Stiebel Eltron about it and they said, yeah, we do have it, but we don't recommend it in case it breaks and then you lose both of your hot water and your hydronic. But in summer, if you've got this huge system, which is really powerful, but it's only doing your hot water for the taps, it's overspec'd. And so the conventional wisdom is we don't do it.
Terrific, thanks. Alan asked a question which is very topical because our friendly Boroondara Council has now given Boroondara residents the option of a $2,000 rebate on electrification via the Solar Savers program. Alan asks about a unit that's in the Solar Saver program called a Viessman Vitocal, which I had not heard of until a few weeks ago. And by the expression of your face, Tim, you probably don't know any more about it than I do. I did a bit of research. It looks like they're a very reputable German company, but no idea about their position in the Australian marketplace.
No, I haven't heard, so don't have any info to add on that one, sorry.
I can say that I do know that the people who run Solar Savers are very scrupulous with their research. So I would suggest that it's not going to be a bad unit. But sorry, Alan, neither Tim nor I know anything about them. Zanil asked about power. So dedicated versus shared circuit. So he says that a lot of the integrated units have got a 10 amp three-pronged socket on them and can be plugged into a power point. What's your views?
My views are that's wonderful and fantastic and makes installation a lot easier. So I'll try to keep this at a level we can it's understandable for everyone. With different heat pumps, the manufacturers will have different requirements for the electrical connection. So the easiest, if we take a really easy example, is an instant gas hot water system. It will have a power point there, and some of the heat pumps you can actually just plug straight in. And that's great because it means we don't need an electrician and you've saved anywhere from $250 to $900. Particularly if you've got an old switchboard and you live in a double-story house and your switchboard is over here and your hot water unit is over the other side of the house 30 meters away. If we need to install a reclaim, for example, which is required to be run all the way back to the switchboard on a dedicated circuit, then that is going to significantly increase the price of your installation. So a reclaim requires a dedicated circuit. Some of the all-in-ones do not. And then there's a whole raft of scenarios in between those two. But it depends on the heat pump that you go for.
Terrific, Tim. It sounds like you and I are absolutely on song here because that's pretty much what I answered. Another question came from Stephanie. She's got an off-grid 5 kilowatt solar system and her plumber said, no go, that's not enough to run a heat pump. And I would tend to agree with that because your heat pump probably won't need 5 kilowatts most of the time, but a heat pump, without getting too technical, doesn't modulate. It's got to be on or off. So you would typically need 1 or 2 kilowatts reliable for a heat pump to run at all.
Yeah, I don't have a strong view on the off-grid sort of requirements. So no, yeah, don't really have much to add on that one.
If you've got a battery, which I'm assuming if you're an off-grid system, Stephanie, a 5 kilowatt system is going to go into a battery, then it's more a matter of how much your battery can provide rather than how much your solar can provide. So I think maybe reach out to Tim or myself. We can go through that in more detail offline. But yeah, I think I'd be more worried about the battery that you've got rather than the actual solar be dictating that. That were the key questions that I found. David, was there anything else in your run through that we should respond to?
No, I don't think so. You know, most of the questions were answered on the way. The one, which I think has been addressed, but perhaps could do with a little bit more, is the single person planning to put in a heat pump hot water system. If using a timer and the solar power, it's a matter of what size system and brands are recommended. Given that I rarely have more than 2 short-term house guests, I suppose my point is, if you've got 2 short-term house guests, does that mean you need a bigger system, or would you say you can rely on a booster?
For us, in the shower before they come.
Yeah. Yes. Or yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably go. I mean, look, it's personal. Obviously depends on budgets and things like that. But I would say probably go the smaller system and change the settings. But that's probably me. Like I'm more inclined to go, okay, if I need to change the settings, I'll just go and do it.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people I speak to, I just want to set and forget. I don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to go and change settings. I don't want to have to worry about it at all. And that's a perfectly valid approach. But yeah, I guess the important thing there is that if you do, one of the nuances of the heat pump hot water market is the smaller size systems, they're not a lot cheaper than the standard systems. So before I touched on 270 litres being a standard size for a number of the manufacturers, a number of those manufacturers have a smaller system and it might be $50 cheaper. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get that one because you may just want to heat less water if you're never going to use it. We do a lot of Aquatech units, and their smaller unit is about $300 cheaper. So that's one of the reasons we like them. But yeah, you sort of pushed in that way a little bit anyway to have a sizable unit that's going to serve, certainly, for one person plus guests. Most units and most manufacturers are going to be able to serve that pretty well.
I think there's another topic has been around timers, which is a little bit of a philosophical thing because a lot of us have grown up on gas storage, which just runs whenever it's necessary, and historically, if you've got a family full of kids and you run the gas hot water cold, then you wait an hour and it comes back to strength. Yep. Now, you can run a heat pump like that. So if you basically leave the timer open and it will run whenever it needs to, which is not necessarily a big issue because they're so damn cheap to run anyway, it doesn't matter in many cases. If you've got one that's right outside a bedroom window that you might want to set your timer window so that it doesn't run, like Tim said, with 2 o'clock in the morning to keep people awake. But there's just a bit of a philosophical of when do you open it up. So I've got this window set on mine. It runs for, the timer is open. The timer window is open for 3 or 4 hours. Now, the system only runs for as long as it needs to run to get the water hot. So even though you say heat during these 4 hours, it might only heat for an hour and a half to get it going. If you've used up most of your hot water, it will run for a big chunk of those 4 hours. So it's just a little bit of thinking about it. And when I first got my heat pump, I was quite anal about it. And then I thought it cost me almost nothing to run. So I just opened that window and bigger, and I have never had a problem.
I think one of the other things, one of the myths that we may not have addressed before is that heat pumps don't work in cold climates. And I actually had that question today from a customer, and I explained the different temperature scales. So there's Celsius, Fahrenheit, and there's also Kelvin. So 0 degrees Kelvin is when there's absolutely no heat whatsoever in the air. And that is equivalent to, I think it's 273 or
273 negative.
273. Yeah, negative Celsius. And so 0 degrees Celsius, relatively speaking, there's actually a lot of heat in the air, even though it feels very cold. So where the timer can be an issue, Russell, is if you live in Canberra or if you live in Hobart, where it gets very cold overnight, and a heat pump may not work down at -5 degrees or something like that. So a reclaim probably will, but an Aquatech or an Apricus probably won't. And it will have to work a little bit harder. But you know, Melbourne's winter, particularly running it during the middle of the day, you're always getting to at least 5, usually 10 degrees Celsius. It's a fairly moderate temperate climate relative to other parts in the world. And if you think about areas of Canada and Northern Europe, they've got much harder challenges with heat pumps in those sorts of temperatures.
Okay.
Okay.
And perhaps I could come in with one final question, which has come through the chat actually, but and this may be something that you can't answer, but the rebates we get in Victoria are pretty good. Do you think they will last if we get a change of government?
Great question. I don't have a strong view on that one. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think so for obvious reasons. But it's there's 3 rebates. There's one federal one, there's 2 state ones. The Solvic one I explained before. There's another Victorian one called VEECs, or Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates. The fun fact on the STCs, the federal one and the VEECs, is that they don't actually come out of the government's money. It's actually levied on bills that we kind of all pay for, and then that money goes to the energy companies, and the energy companies need to buy a certain amount of these STCs and VEECs, which are like a financial instrument. So it's not actually the government paying for those. The government is paying for the 3rd rebate, the Sol Victoria one. They're obviously paying to oversee the program as well, although we all pay as well. But yeah, who knows? Who knows what will happen?
All right.
Terrific. I think we should wrap up there.